Welcome to the Joy of Connecting, where modern professionals share stories of meaningful connection and how it can increase business success, unlock career growth, and create personal happiness. If you like what you hear today, get even more by following the Joy of Connecting on LinkedIn and subscribing to our newsletter that features tips from experts on how to network and connect with more meaning. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Joy of Connecting. Today's a special one for me because not only am I talking with someone who is essentially halfway around the world from where I am, but she's also a person that, barely having met, we felt a connection from the get-go. And it wasn't just that we both desperately leverage community and connection for our careers and our success, but also we've had quite a few great calls with mom life where there's a kid under one arm or something going on. She is the founder of Pollinate. Welcome, Yuval. Tell us a bit about what you do, but more importantly, who are you passionate about helping?
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we, like you said, we instantly connected. I think it was my daughter pooping right next to the Zoom screen that just took us immediately to the next level. And thank God for her, because I feel like it was the fastest icebreaker I've ever had on the call. Like you said, I'm Yuval. I'm the founder of Pollinate, and I'm really passionate about helping founders unlock learnings and connections from their peers to help them grow their business. So working with founders, but really helping founders learn from one another as opposed to learn from me.
What's so fascinating to me is you did a lot of that during your time in the US. You've been at companies, you were, everything from kind of the head of community to actually the host of a podcast around ecosystem building, connections, helping founders, CEOs specifically, get what they need through each other, through those connections has been powerful in the US. And now you are actually doing the same thing from Israel. And so tell us a little bit about actually how you've done it in both places and what you've seen kind of is critical in both places.
Yeah. So when I was in New York, I built a business called Venwise. I was not the founder. I was the number two. The concept of the business at a high level is that we created peer groups for founders. They met for 3 hours. I was brought on during a very critical moment in the business where COVID hit 2 weeks before I joined to take our in-person community online and scale. Now it kind of unlocked scaling across the country because we were all on Zoom and there were different things we had to do to kind of take the in-person experience and turn it online, train the facilitators, understand how the product shifted, how we're charging for it differently, how we're assessing who's a fit in a different way because we're doing this online. Quickly went from being a kind of an take it online consultant, which was a thing I made up at the beginning of COVID when I got let go, to integral part of the business. I led a part of our growth, our curation, our product, which is really like the community and how we connect people within the community. And I managed a bunch of our team. I was there for 5 years. We grew the community. There were about 50 peer groups that met on a monthly basis, over 300 members, etc. And when I decided to move to Israel, I said, okay, let me take this skill set. I'm sure I could figure out what to do with it. And I got here and people loved the concept of, and I told people my background. I got to the end where I talked about building Venwise and they're like, nothing like that exists here. And I'm like, wait, there's so much competition for Venwise in the US now and nothing here. There's a blue ocean of possibilities kind of at my fingertips. And I had the playbook in my hand. I'm very conscious of the fact that Israelis are very different than Americans. And the biggest differences was that we had to take it back to in-person. Israelis were not Zoom. Another difference is I didn't have a reputation in Israel at all, while I had built a reputation in the US. And so the strategy was really different. Okay, you want me to come and show up and just pour my heart out and tell everyone all the secrets of my business, and I've never met this girl that just moved to Israel 6 months ago? Probably not, And so I had to build a lot of trust in people that other people had built trust in and work essentially with them as my channel partners. And then in the meeting too, Israelis don't like structure. Americans really like structure. Israelis don't respect structure at all. I had to let go of this thing that I had spent so long figuring out how to optimize, because in the US people really, really appreciate a meeting that flows very well. And in Israel, they could just chat. They don't need the structure, and it works much better for them. like, learning and development just doesn't exist. Like, in Israel, coaching is brand new, maybe 2 or 3 years old, maybe 5 years old for some people. So, we're, like, still educating the market on the fact that this is a thing that people spend their business expenses like, this is a business expense that you can spend money on,
Yeah.
and it's totally legitimate for a CEO to have a peer group and spend money on that as part of how they take care of themselves as a leader of the business. So, there were a lot of little tweaks, but the concept is the same concept, and the types of people I'm working with are the same. I'll say one last thing. As we scaled Venwise, I didn't facilitate groups anymore. I was managing the facilitators, and by the end, I realized that that was my least favorite part of the job. I had 29 freelancers that worked for us that I was managing, and I ended up just being HR. Like, "Hey, I need you to help move in this meeting, and I need you to, like, send my invoice like, my invoices came through. Why haven't I gotten paid?" It was like admin and HR. And I told myself, "I won't do this again in Israel. I'm building it differently," because I missed the part that I truly loved, which was facilitating meetings. And then now one of the things I do because I facilitate the meetings is I can actually take on projects and work with the founders one-on-one. So, like, right now I have 2 recruiting projects I'm working on, helping someone fundraise, doing some customer introductions, and that's where I can tie community building to sing in a way that kind of makes my heart sing. And when I was building Benwise, I felt like I was missing a part of myself when I didn't get to do the actual service that our business offered.
Yeah, that's really powerful because I think a lot of folks get into roles related to connection because they actually love the connection, and then we can absolutely find ourselves too far away from it, and I think that's a really good warning. I'm actually raising that little flag in my own head too, which is make sure if you are a connector at heart that you have the opportunity to keep your
Yeah.
hands in that wonderful thing. So, I've gotta ask you, and it's kind of the first question I always ask when folks are on the show, in your experience then, in the hands-on, in meeting these needs of CEOs who, as I always said, the people who need to talk to each other most are founders, right? Like founder CEOs. Is there a story that you'd like to share that you saw where a connection, or maybe recently one you've been a part of where a connection just opened the door or kind of helped them take off their business or maybe help them personally?
Yeah, wow, there's so many, because
Sure.
this is, like, literally what I do all day, but watching someone bring a topic to a meeting and that topic evolve over time based on the way that other people give feedback, and then watching them have, like, beers over it throughout the month and then come back kind of closer to each other really makes me feel like I've, like, fully done my job because I've kind of created a space for them to share something, gotten 4 or 5 people's insights and sharpened up where they're thinking, and then had the opportunity to, like, really dive into it with a founder that they might have never known and might have never gotten to the place where they actually could have that conversation, and what I set them up for is, like, a really, really impactful session, like, drinks or coffee or whatever it is, and I feel like whenever I see someone taking the relationship offline and having a one-on-one conversation, I know that, like, what I've done is I've, like, hit the nail on the head of the type of people that they need to be surrounding themselves by, and then I've created a container where they can actually get to the topic they need help with, find the person that can help them with, and have a conversation with that person. And I know that sounds broad, but whenever that happens, I'm like, "This is my zone of genius. I have found it, and I'm so happy to be here."
Okay, well, then I have to ask, I want a little bit of the secret sauce. What is that? What is like one trick? Not all of them. What is one trick you do or one question you ask or one thing you've done, besides obviously the brilliant structure that you have these kind of monthly setup? What's one thing that you might suggest to our listeners that they could also do to get to that, to be the connector that leads to, folks connecting offline?
Yeah, so I think whether you're doing connecting work one-on-one or, like, where you're facilitating a group and helping them connect with each other or you're doing it alone, people are terrible listeners. So, people are terrible at 2 they're terrible at a lot of things, but 2 of the things that people suck at are, 1, knowing what they need with, and 2, listening for what actually people need help with. So, like, on both ends, there's always a breakdown. And I find that, like, let's call them more junior connectors, they kind of wanna prove that they're valuable by offering introductions really quickly, and they don't actually take the time to listen and understand. I'd rather say, "I'm sorry, I can't help you," than, like, toss some names out of people that could help you because I know when you get to that call and that person isn't helpful, then we have like, my reputation goes down, right? Like, for example, today in the group, seed stage consumer founders in Israel, kind of the high level curation of the group. One guy started talking about how he has a head of marketing on his team. She's amazing at performance marketing. She hasn't expanded past performance marketing into other marketing strategies, and it's limiting their business because as you know, leaning into performance marketing is way too risky, like, as a one and done marketing strategy for a business. There's too
Yeah.
many variables
Yes.
changing all the time. And so he tried to say it lightly to her. It didn't work. She hasn't made a change. That was before the end of last year. And he feels now like he needs to take a stronger approach or a clearer approach. So the question he brought to the group was, how do I approach her with that? What the group really wanted to talk about, because it's consumer founders, is all the other approaches he should take with his business. And have you tried this? And have you tried this? And he ran with it because honestly, they're all men, and it's easier to talk about strategy than it is to talk about, like, difficult conversation,
Getting something done, like making a
a
change.
change, and a conversation with someone that might be uncomfortable is, like, not as fun to talk about, but that's what he brought up. And I just paused the conversation, like, maybe a minute in. I was like, "Guys, he's not asking for marketing strategies. He's asking for management strategies, right? Let's,
Mhm.
like, let's pause for a second, restate your question." Okay, the question and
Mhm.
then I repeated again, I'm like, "Who here has worked with a," and I kind of asked them a specific question that they can answer. If we had just run through marketing strategies, what would have happened is my member would have left and been like, "Cool, I know there's a lot of new marketing strategies we should be trying," which is, like, a really crappy feeling because he already knows he needs to do that, and he needs to figure out how to get his head of marketing to do it because he's the CEO and he doesn't have the bandwidth to do that on his own, and he hired someone who should be able to do this, right? The listening part is the biggest skill, and really making sure you understand what it is that the person is wanting, whether you're in a group setting or an individual setting, and only offering what they're looking for. Not offering,
Mhm.
like, "I also know a random guy who can help with this in case one day you're looking for it," because that's not what I'm looking for right now, and point and shoot is the best type of connector there is. Scatter is the worst kind of connectors. You waste time. The point of connecting is to save time and get someone to who they need as soon as possible.
Yeah. 2 for 1 answer on that, everybody. We got 2 priceless answers for what where to think about, where to kind of some advice as far as you move into that. I have to I know this is always a short episode, so we're running time. I have to ask you a question that's a little off the books for me normally, but I'd love to hear from you because a lot of folks we have on here are in charge of building connection or building community for another purpose, right? For a business they work for or to meet the need of a group that has, a niche focus and needs to connect over something. You are in the business of actually community and connection itself. So you have actually leaned into building a business around building those
Yeah.
connections. I'd love to just hear a little bit about kind of what you learned that might be different. Like, how is it different for you building a business of connection versus building connection for another reason?
I've been the head of community for a product that isn't community before. I always felt a little
Mhm.
bit like a fraud. I was like, "Bring all these people together," and ultimately, like, the sales team is gonna come in and, like, grab some leads and go try to sell them something. Like,
Mhm.
I just couldn't do it. Like, I just felt this was someone's real life that they were kind of wanting community and belonging around, and then we were, like, selling a software tool. And I think that that type of community is often free. It's almost always free, and it's almost always being trying to be as big as possible, right? Because it's a lead gen tool or a product engagement tool, like, the more the merrier. I'm also not a more the merrier person. I'd rather less community members who are paying more and, like, they're spending more time and money. It's like depth over breadth. By the way, this Circle just released their community report of the year, and the trend is moving towards high-paying small communities. So, it seems like I'm not the only one, and I'm really happy to see that that's a the more communities out there, the more likelihood mine like, it's educating the market on this being a thing that people do.
On the value. Yes,
The
absolutely.
thing about being a community that is a business is the community is a product, and the community is
Mhm.
marketing. And so the same people that have built communities as marketing tools aren't the right people necessarily to be building communities as businesses, because I look at my community very much like a product, and do, like, outreach and sales or whatever, but, like, there's no free tier of my community. Some people also have
Yeah.
that where they have, like, the freemium and then you paid. There's no free version of my community. I think that the biggest advice or way to this, structure for thinking about it is like a product person, is like, what
Yes.
are the features of this community? What, like, you look at pricing, you look at the feature set, you look at the engagement the same way you would as a product person.
Yeah, I gotta jump in here. You're looking at time to value, you're looking at pricing strategy, you're looking at then at marketing for the product itself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Folks, if you're listening, by the way, Yuval and I are talking about this a lot soon, but just the 2 of us.
I would love to, and I actually don't think a lot of people are talking about it. I'm not really
Mm.
sure why, because the trends are showing that more people are trying to do this, but I just haven't found a lot of resources about it. So I would love to find other resources. I'd love to be part of building those resources. I'm really passionate about that. And I'm happy to speak to anyone who's doing this work.
Well, I'm gonna get more of your time later. We'll maybe have you back on the show as soon as we start doing part 2s.
Uh,
But I'd love to ask ending with what you just said, where could people find out more about you and what you're building?
LinkedIn. I write on LinkedIn every day. If you're interested in mom content, you're going to get that woven in with community membership. I guess my 3 pillars are mom/personal life and a CEO's brain and sharing kind of what they're thinking about and then how I turn that into a business that I run. I'm a solopreneur. I don't have a boss and no one works for me. And we generate revenue that I rely on for my lifestyle. So I write on LinkedIn about all that, and there you'll see the website for the business if you wanna see how I position it and how I talk about it. And I'm so happy that we met through LinkedIn actually, right? Like, that's how we found each other. So I love finding, like, random sparks of just, like, amazing people that I would have never known otherwise. LinkedIn is good for that. So,
Yeah,
right.
well, that's the joy of connecting. That's why we're on the show. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review to help us reach more listeners. Have a story of your own to share or know someone who should be on the show? Visit www.joyofconnect.ing and let us know. Now go send a short message to someone you've been meaning to connect with. You never know where it might lead.